It is commonly believed that Antarctica is a lifeless, icy desert where time stopped millions of years ago. But what if this icy shell is not just a natural coincidence, but a giant safe? A safe that holds evidence capable of completely rewriting our history and biology textbooks. Today, we won't rely on rumors. In this video, there are only hard facts, specific coordinates, and research results that official science often prefers to keep in closed archives. We will go from discoveries of giant creatures and tropical forests to the finding of megaliths and artifacts whose technologies are thousands of years ahead of their time. Where did the metal wire in the ancient ice come from? Who left the perfect stone steps in Enderby Land? And whose genetic code, unlike anything else on the planet, is awakening right now in the depths of the continent? We will examine 16 shocking discoveries that prove Antarctica has never been what it seems at first glance. Ready to find out what the sixth continent is really hiding? Hello, my friend. You're on the Kurtop channel. Giants of the icy past. Let's start with facts that make you look at the biology of this region in a different way. Seymour Island, located off the coast of the Antarctic Peninsula, has long been a mecca for paleontologists. But one discovery stands out from the rest. Here, the bones of a creature were discovered that officially received the name Paleodiptes klekowski. This is not just another extinct species. This is a penguin whose height exceeded 2 meters and whose weight was about 120 kilograms. To give you a sense of scale, a modern emperor penguin barely reaches the waist of such a giant. Imagine a bird the size of a professional basketball player that ruled these shores. Researchers from the Argentine La Plata Museum, studying the joints of the wings and leg bones, concluded that it was a perfect hunter, capable of staying underwater much longer than any modern one. But why is this important for our story? Archaeology and paleontology go hand in hand here. The presence of such gigantic life forms indicates that Antarctica's ecosystem in the past was not just rich, it was abundant. The enormous amount of food and completely different temperature conditions allowed evolution to create giants. For us, this is an important marker. If nature created birds as tall as humans, then what other surprises could have been hidden in that ecosystem? Some independent researchers are asking a question that official science tries to ignore. If the fauna was so large, could other inhabitants of this continent, those who were at the top of the food chain, also have matched these sizes? Antarctica at that time was a world of giants, and the discovery on Seymour Island is just the first entry in an archive we're only beginning to uncover. Tropical forests of Antarctica. The Prince Charles Mountains in East Antarctica are the largest geological archive on the planet. It was here, among the sheer cliffs of McRobertson Land, that scientists found tangible evidence that the current state of the continent is an anomaly. In the layers of sedimentary rocks, geologists discovered fossilized forests preserved in perfect condition. We're talking about plants of the genus Glossopteris, which dominated here about 260 million years ago during the Permian period. These trees reached up to 30 meters in height and formed dense forests in conditions that seem impossible today. A group of researchers led by Eric Gulbrandsen from the University of Wisconsin conducted a detailed analysis of these findings. It turned out that the wood preserved its cellular structure to such an extent that traces of ancient fungi and microorganisms were found in it, literally frozen in time. The preservation of the tissue was so high that scientists were able to extract a fragment of amino acids from the cells, which are over 250 million years old. Such a degree of organic preservation is only possible with extremely rapid burial of biomass. In geology, such cases are associated with events of instantaneous replacement. When volcanic ash or powerful sediment flows, block oxygen access even before the decomposition processes begin. This turns the Prince Charles Mountains into a giant time capsule. The discovered trunk segments preserved annual rings, which show that the trees grew at an incredible rate using the round-the-clock daylight of the polar summer, and then abruptly entered a dormant state. An additional fact is the colossal coal deposits discovered in this same region. Coal is concentrated biomass that forms only from 1 million tons of undecayed plants. The presence of coal seams in central Antarctica confirms that the continent was once the planet's biological reactor. The scale of these discoveries indicates that the freezing of the continent was not the result of a gradual climate decline, but an abrupt end to life, traces of which now have to be extracted from stone at extremely low temperatures. The Martian visitor from Allen Hills. Antarctica is not only an ideal archive of Earth's history, but also the best repository of extraterrestrial objects on the planet. In 1984, in the Allen Hills area, a search team discovered a meteorite weighing almost 2 kilograms, which was designated ALH 84001. 10 years later, this unremarkable stone sparked the biggest scientific scandal of the century. Analysis of the gas in the sealed glass inclusions inside the meteorite showed that it arrived from Mars about 13,000 years ago, after traveling through space for millions of years. In 1996, a group of scientists from NASA led by David McKay published the results of scanning electron microscopy of the inner layers of the stone. The images revealed carbonate globules and microscopic structures resembling fossilized bacteria. These formations had a segmented shape similar to terrestrial nanobacteria, but were dozens of times smaller. The publication was so sensational that U.S. President Bill Clinton made a special televised address announcing the possible discovery of evidence of extraterrestrial life. Skeptics in the scientific community later put forward alternative theories, claiming that similar structures could have arisen as a result of abiotic processes, that is, without the involvement of living organisms. However, supporters of the biological theory point to the presence of magnetite crystals and chains of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons inside the meteorite, which on Earth are usually products of bacterial activity. What's important is that the meteorite itself is estimated to be 4 billion years old, a time when Mars had a dense atmosphere and liquid water on its surface. The Wallen Hills discovery turned Antarctica into the main laboratory for astrobiology. The continent's icy shell acts like a sterile safe. Meteorites here are not exposed to chemical effects from soil or moisture, so they are preserved in their original state. ALH 84001 remains the most thoroughly studied object in human history, and although debates about the nature of the Martian worms continue to this day, this rock became the first physical evidence that life could exist beyond our planet. The giant staircase of Antarctica. One of the most discussed discoveries made through satellite monitoring was a structure in the Enderby land region. At the coordinates 68 degrees 54 minutes south latitude and 88 degrees 42 minutes east longitude, an object was discovered that was named the Giant Staircase. It is a series of massive stone steps that emerge from a creeping glacier and descend steeply down the slope. The total length of the visible part of the structure is more than 200 meters, and it does not fit into the surrounding landscape at all. The main argument in favor of the artificial origin of this object is its geometry. Each step is exactly 14 meters wide and about 4 meters high. Unlike natural terraces, which are formed by erosion or landslides, here we see perfectly flat horizontal platforms and vertical cuts at a 90-degree angle. Geologists officially call this a stepped glacier, but ice when moving is not able to maintain the shape of a well-defined rectangle for decades. The material of the object is dark andesite, an ultra-dense rock that was used to build megalithic complexes in Peru and Bolivia. The scale of the Staircase of the Giants is impressive. If these are indeed the remains of an ancient structure, then it surpasses even the largest Inca foundations in size. Scientists from Pennsylvania State University, during their analysis of shadows in photographs from 2026, confirmed that there are virtually no gaps between the blocks, which indicates a masterful fitting of the stone. The fact that the site is located at an altitude of 2,000 meters above sea level makes the theory that it was created by any civilization known to us impossible. This is physical evidence that in ancient times, when Antarctica was not yet buried under ice, there were megastructures here, the scale of which we are only beginning to realize. Access to this area is strictly limited today, and the coordinates of the site are often blurred on commercial maps, which only fuels the interest of independent researchers. Artifact from a deep core. The history of Antarctic exploration is filled with official reports, But the most interesting discoveries often remain in the personal diaries of polar explorers and in closed archives. One such mystery is an incident that occurred in the 1960s during the first deep drilling operations near the Vostok station. Soviet scientists, while extracting ice cores from several hundred meters deep, discovered something inside the ice that simply couldn't be there. In the transparent mass of frozen water, which was estimated to be tens of thousands of years old, an extremely thin metal wire was found. At first glance, it resembled an ordinary human hair, but it had characteristics that didn't match any known alloy of that time. The researchers who conducted the initial examination noted the object's phenomenal strength. The thread couldn't be torn by hand, and its surface showed no signs of corrosion, despite being in direct contact with moisture for thousands of years. The technology of the 1960s was limited, but preliminary spectral analysis revealed the presence of rare earth metals and isotopes that are almost never found in pure form in the Earth's crust. The key point is the depth it was found at. The thread was found in a layer of ice that formed long before the start of the Industrial Revolution, and even before the emergence of the first known civilizations of Mesopotamia. This eliminated the chance of accidental sample contamination during drilling. According to the official version, the find was classified as an anomalous inclusion of space debris, but in fact the data suggests otherwise. The structure of the filament was too regular for a random meteorite formation. It had a clear cross-section and signs of high-temperature drawing. Rumors that the artifact was immediately seized by intelligence services and sent to classified laboratories still circulate among veterans of polar expeditions. The Antarctic ice acted as a perfect safe, preserving a fragment of technology that was thousands of years ahead of its time. Awakening after 40,000 years. While we search for traces of technology in Antarctica, the permafrost of Siberia has proven that ice is not a graveyard, but a waiting room. In the lower reaches of the Kolyma River, at a depth of 40 meters, scientists discovered the nematode worm Vita panagrolimus kolymaensis. Radiocarbon analysis showed an age of 46,000 years. During all this time, the organism was in a state of cryptobiosis, a state of deep hibernation, in which all vital processes stop. In the laboratory, researchers were able to bring the worm back to life. It turned out that the secret to such long-term survival lies in earthly mechanisms. The synthesis of trehalose sugar, which protects cells from being destroyed by ice crystals. This tiny organism became the absolute record holder among multicellular creatures, making a leap from the Pleistocene era to the present day. But this was only the first signal. In 2026, it became known that entire microbial communities had awakened from a permafrost core in Alaska. Bacteria that were 40,000 years old didn't just come back to life after thawing, they began actively decomposing organic matter. This proves that what is stored in the planet's icy shells are not just individual organisms, but preserved ecosystems. Such a discovery turns revival from permafrost into a frightening tool. Essentially, we are getting a natural experiment that tests the limits of life over time. It makes you wonder what other biological archives from the past might be activated as global ice continues to thaw. The Abyss of Denman Glacier, subtitles created by Dima Torzak. The Denman Glacier in East Antarctica hides the deepest point on land on our planet. Research in 2026 conducted using next-generation radars confirmed that beneath this ice stream lies a canyon reaching a depth of 3,500 meters below sea level. For comparison, this is almost 10 times deeper than the shores of the Dead Sea. But what attracted scientists' attention was not so much the scale of the depression as the abnormal thermal readings at its bottom. Seismic sensors recorded stable vibrations at the base of the canyon and water temperatures that are 4 degrees higher than at the surface. This indicates the presence of a powerful influx of geothermal energy or a hidden circulation system that supports life in complete isolation. That same year, deep-sea probes transmitted data indicating the presence of complex organic matter in this trench, whose genetic profile differs by 30% from all known marine species. Today, the Denman Abyss is called a time capsule, where, due to the colossal pressure and the specific chemistry of the water, evolution could have taken a completely different path. The fact that the bottom of this canyon is just a few hundred kilometers from the South Magnetic Pole makes it an ideal place to search for artifacts that could have been preserved in their original state for millions of years. Processed obsidian at a depth of 1 kilometer. If the metal wire from the 1960s still leaves room for debate about space debris, then the 2025 discovery in the Transantarctic Mountains hits the mark exactly. During deep drilling at just over 1,000 meters, a fragment of black volcanic glass, obsidian, was extracted from the ice sheet. However, this was not just a piece of rock. After cleaning the sample in sterile laboratory conditions, scientists discovered traces on its surface that cannot be attributed to natural processes. The surface of the stone showed signs of deep mechanical polishing and microscopic grooves running at a strictly defined angle. Such processing is characteristic of cutting tools, but not of a random rock fragment. The problem for mainstream science lies in two facts. First, there are no obsidian outcrops within hundreds of kilometers from the drilling site. The stone was deliberately brought there by someone. Second, the layer of ice in which it was found has been forming for 200,000 years. According to the accepted chronology, during this period, the ancestors of modern humans had just begun to master the simplest stone tools in Africa. There was no question of any human presence in Antarctica, let alone technologies for fine stone polishing. Geologists tried to explain the find as natural chipping under the pressure of a glacier, but microscopic analysis showed no chaotic cracks. On the contrary, the notches had the same depth and spacing, which is characteristic of manual or machine work. This polished obsidian is a troublesome artifact. It proves that 200,000 years ago, when the continent was already partially covered with ice, someone was here who was able to work hard rocks at a level comparable to the late Neolithic or even higher. Once again, it acted as a time capsule, preserving an object that directly points to the existence of intelligent activity in Antarctica, long before the first civilizations known to us appeared. The Antarctic Sphinx. One of the most discussed discoveries in recent years is an object in the area of a mountain ridge at coordinates 74 degrees 10 minutes south latitude and 164 degrees east longitude. Researchers call this the Antarctic Sphinx. The structure is colossal in size, about 2 kilometers long and over 300 meters high. When looking at high-resolution satellite images, the resemblance to the Egyptian Sphinx seems uncanny. The object clearly shows the outlines of a head, broad shoulders, and a distinctive protrusion that resembles a nose. The comparison of scales is striking. While the Egyptian Sphinx in Giza is 73 meters long, its Antarctic counterpart is 27 times longer. The official scientific explanation states that what we see is a yardang, a geological formation created by centuries of wind erosion. The wind in this part of the continent reaches speeds of 300 km/h, and according to geologists, it simply carved this peculiar shape out of the rock. However, a mathematical analysis of the object's facial symmetry shows that its features are too proportional for the random chaos of natural forces. In 2025, an independent group of researchers using thermal scanning data discovered a large cavity beneath the head of this structure. Its volume is estimated at 40,000 cubic meters. The entrance to this chamber is an almost perfect rectangle about 10 meters wide, which is now hidden under a 40-meter layer of compacted snow. This discovery recalls the legends of the Hall of Records, said to be hidden beneath the Sphinx's paws in Egypt. Perhaps in Antarctica, we are not just witnessing a quirk of nature, but the original prototype, a monument after which the sanctuaries of the ancient world were modeled. The fact that the object is oriented strictly to the east, just like its counterpart in Giza, practically rules out the theory of random geological weathering. The lead trace of Antarctica. When researchers manage to accomplish the nearly impossible and drill through the ice sheet all the way to the bedrock, they gain access to pre-glacial silt. This layer of sedimentary mud preserves the chemical composition of the atmosphere and soil from the time when the continent was still green. In 2026, during the analysis of samples extracted from beneath the Totten Glacier in East Antarctica, geochemists encountered an anomaly that cannot be explained by natural causes. A sharp, sudden increase in the concentration of lead and copper was found in the samples of bottom silt. According to the accepted chronology, this layer was formed millions of years ago, long before not only the emergence of industry, but even the appearance of Homo sapiens itself. However, isotopic analysis of these metals showed an unambiguous result. The lead and copper had been subjected to high-temperature processing. In other words, they had been smelted. The presence of such man-made inclusions in layers this ancient is a real disaster for official archaeology. Metal smelting involves large-scale use of fire, the creation of furnaces, and logically the mining of ore. If all these processes took place in Antarctica in ancient times, then the entire history of humanity as a species is just a cover-up for the real events. The scale of pollution recorded in the silt beneath the Totten Glacier indicates serious industrial production. A comparative analysis with ice cores from Greenland, where traces of metallurgy from ancient Rome are recorded, showed that the Antarctic cores show a much stronger signal. This suggests that the ancient civilization of Antarctica had energy capacities comparable to our own era. Once again, the ice acted as a perfect safe, preserving the chemical signature of an industry that was wiped from the face of the Earth millions of years ago. And now, by extracting this silt from a depth of 3 kilometers, we obtain irrefutable evidence that beneath our feet lies the foundation of a civilization that surpassed us long before we appeared. Elongated skulls. In 2014, the news about a discovery in the La Playa area made headlines everywhere, and it is still considered one of the most closely guarded secrets of modern anthropology. A group of researchers discovered 3 human skulls frozen in ancient layers of ice. What surprised the scientists wasn't the mere fact that humans were in this icy desert, but their physical form. These skulls had an extremely elongated occipital part, which is classified in science as dolichocephaly. Similar artifacts were previously found in Peru's Paracas and in ancient Egyptian tombs. Official science usually attributes such anomalies to ritual head binding during infancy. However, the Antarctic find has a critical difference. The cranial volume of these specimens is 25% larger than that of an ordinary human. This is physically impossible to achieve by simply compressing the bones. A brain of such mass simply would not fit into a standard human skull. The find in the La Playa area completely shatters the theory that Antarctica was only discovered in the 19th century. The presence of people with specific genetics here suggests a direct link between the continent and the higher castes of ancient South American and Middle Eastern civilizations. Researchers are asking, was Antarctica the center of this global culture? Was it the place from which knowledge and genetic code spread to the rest of the world? The strangest thing happened after the initial analysis. The area where the remains were discovered was immediately closed off, and information about the find disappeared from official press releases. They were replaced by standard reports on meteorological observations. But independent experts are convinced that these 3 skulls are just the tip of the iceberg. If entire burial sites of beings whose intelligence and physiology surpass ours are hidden under the ice, it explains why the world's leading powers so fiercely guard access to the Antarctic plains. Traces of megafires. In 2021, an international group of researchers published in the journal Polar Research the results of an analysis of sedimentary rocks collected on James Ross Island. In layers dating back to the Upper Cretaceous period, large deposits of paleocharcoal were discovered. This is irrefutable evidence that about 75 million years ago, Antarctica was engulfed by fires of colossal strength. Fires destroyed hectares of forests made up of coniferous and flowering plants during an era when the continent was still part of the supercontinent Gondwana and had a moderately warm climate. The main question that scientists do not have a clear answer to is the cause and intensity of the fires. James Ross Island is located at 64 degrees south latitude and 58 degrees west longitude. An analysis of the reflectivity of the discovered coal showed that the burning temperature at the epicenters exceeded 1,000 degrees. For comparison, a typical forest fire rarely reaches such values. Such temperatures are characteristic either of the fall of large meteorites or of the most powerful volcanic eruptions with the release of pyroclastic flows. The problem with the official version is that in the studied layers, there was not enough volcanic ash or tektites found to indicate a cosmic impact. This means that the forests of Antarctica burned with incredible ferocity, which does not fit into the climate models of that time. The density of soot in the deposits indicates that the fires could have been global in nature, literally burning out the biological foundation of the continent. This discovery turns Antarctica into a site of a global catastrophe long before the onset of glaciation. We see traces of violent eradication of life, the causes of which are still hidden in the ancient layers of charred wood. The genetic code of forbidden evolution. The most frightening discovery in recent years was not made as a physical object, but at the level of molecular analysis. In 2026, a group of biologists working with samples of ancient soil extracted from beneath the ice sheet of Victoria Land reported the results of sequencing the wood. The samples contained fragments of proteins and genetic sequences that baffled laboratories around the world. Almost 15% of the discovered genetic material has no analogs in the International GenBank database, which contains information about every known living organism on the planet. These are not just new species of microbes. The complexity of the discovered chains indicates that they belong to highly organized, multicellular organisms. Researchers in Kolara are talking about parallel evolution. These creatures have a genetic code fundamentally unlike anything that has evolved on other continents over hundreds of thousands of years. These are not humans, not primates, and not even mammals in the usual sense. It gives the impression that a completely different branch of life existed in Antarctica, which was wiped from the face of the Earth along with the onset of the Ice Age. Some scientists suggest that a biological archive of the earliest humanity, an intelligent race that dominated the planet long before the appearance of Cro-Magnons, has been preserved under the ice. If that's the case, then Antarctica was their last stronghold, where they tried to preserve their species in the face of the advancing cold. Official reports today are extremely cautious in their wording, referring to these findings as unidentified biological signatures. But for independent researchers, the conclusion is obvious. We search for traces of other civilizations in deep space, while beneath our feet in Antarctica lies the evidence that we have never been the only masters of this planet. These genes continue to sleep in the permafrost, waiting for the ice to finally melt and return them to the modern biosphere. Geometric tunnels of the Ross Glacier, the technological breakthrough of 2026, allowed researchers to look where no ray of light had ever reached before. Autonomous deep-water drones equipped with next-generation sonars were launched under the Ross Ice Shelf. What they transmitted to the surface instantly turned the mission from an oceanographic one into an archaeological sensation. At a depth of hundreds of meters beneath the icy shell, giant cavities were discovered that looked nothing like the result of chaotic currents. The walls of these tunnels looked suspiciously smooth, and in some places the radars detected clear geometric lines and right angles. Unlike natural caves, which usually have jagged edges and narrowings, these structures maintain a stable cross-section for many kilometers. The scale of this network is astonishing. It goes deep into the continent, forming a complex system that resembles transportation or ventilation networks of a huge metropolis. Official reports call these features the result of thermal ice erosion, but hydrodynamic models show that water is not capable of carving such perfect rectangular shapes. The biological discoveries inside these cavities attracted particular interest. Hundreds of kilometers from the open ocean, in complete darkness and under enormous pressure, drones recorded complex organisms resembling deep-sea shrimp and jellyfish. This means that a stable environmental system has formed inside the ice tunnels, with a constant supply of oxygen and nutrients. Some independent experts suggest that these cavities are artificially maintained and are part of an abandoned, yet still functioning, ancient infrastructure. Mummies of the dry valleys. The McMurdo Dry Valleys cover 30,000 square kilometers of land where there has been no precipitation for the last 2 million years. It is here that archaeologists and biologists find hundreds of mummified remains of cray-beater seals and Weddell seals. The main mystery lies in the location. The bodies of the animals are found up to 66 kilometers from the nearest open water and at an altitude of more than 1,200 meters above sea level. Radiocarbon analysis of these finds gives a date range from 30 years to 3,000 years. Due to the extreme dryness and the almost complete absence of putrefactive bacteria, the bodies do not decompose but undergo a process of natural preservation. The flesh turns into a hard, parchment-like substance, and the internal organs are preserved inside it, remaining unchanged for centuries. However, mainstream science still cannot explain the mechanism of collective suicide. To reach the place of their death, the pinnipeds had to travel dozens of kilometers over sharp rocks and icy hummocks, moving deep into the lifeless continent where there is no food at all. During research in 1970, it was found that many of the mummies are oriented with their heads in the same direction, deeper into the continent. Biologists from Oregon State University found that the carbon-14 isotope content in some samples indicates the so-called reservoir effect. The seal's marine diet can age their tissues by thousands of years, making accurate dating extremely difficult. This means that what appear to be 3,000-year-old mummies in the valleys could actually be the remains of creatures from much more ancient eras. The presence of so many travelers to nowhere indicates a major failure in the navigation system or the existence of some factor deep within the dry valleys that has been causing marine animals to leave their territory for certain death for centuries. The pyramids of the El Sord Mountains. Rounding out our list are the structures in the El Sord Mountains, which serve as the final point in any discussion about Antarctic anomalies. While official reports call them ordinary nunataks, meaning peaks of rocks protruding from the glacier, the hard numbers and geometry make us doubt this. We're talking about massive structures with a perfect four-sided shape, whose faces are aligned along the north-south and west-east axes with an accuracy comparable to the pyramids on the Giza Plateau. However, the scale here is completely different. The height of these objects reaches 1 kilometer, making them 5 times taller than any known ancient structures. The slopes of these structures have an exact 45-degree angle, which is extremely rare in nature. Usually, ice and wind erosion creates jagged and asymmetrical shapes, but here we see mirror-like precision. The researcher is particularly interested in the magnetic pulses that are periodically detected around these peaks. The geological formation, consisting mainly of granite and sandstone, does not have the properties to generate such signals. Additional spectral analysis showed that the surface of these objects differs in composition from the surrounding ridge. It gives the impression that this is either an artificial facing or completely foreign elements embedded in the mountain range, even before the onset of glaciation. The mathematical probability that 3 massive peaks would randomly align in a perfect line and take the shape of tetrahedrons is negligible. If these structures are indeed of artificial origin, then what we have before us are not just architectural monuments, but nodes of a global navigation or energy system, the scale of which humanity is only beginning to comprehend. In this case, Antarctica is not just the site of a discovery, but the foundation for something much more grandiose than our entire modern civilization. These giants continue to rise above the icy desert, reminding us of times when the 6th continent played a key role in managing planetary processes. Antarctica is clearly hiding more than we're being told. History textbooks will have to be rewritten. It's only a matter of time. Thank you for watching this video until the end. Subscribe will continue soon.